Hello and good morning. Welcome to another edition of Bloom Consulting. Today's topic is life lessons. So let's get started. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about today as far as our agenda: out of the box thinking, creativity, testing us, how to brainstorm non-traditional thinking, troubleshooting skills, scientific hypothesis, project management, sneak up on problems, and endless learning. It sounds like a mouthful because it is. So, out of the box thinking, facts are true because they're agreed upon by the majority, except it doesn't always mean that they're correct. Sometimes it's fun to question things, validate if they're correct, and you can teach people to memorize facts, yet those facts may not solve your problems when it comes time to thinking outside the box, uh, when the facts are outside the textbook. I've seen this so many times where you can memorize something, someone who appears to be the smartest person intellectually and SAT score 1600, can get straight A's through college and then master's, medical school, what have you. They're brilliant, but get them off a topic that they're unfamiliar with, or get them to solve a problem that they're not experts, and they may not have the critical thinking skills to. So that's why out of the box thinking is so imperative for the field of information technology. So we grew up in Poughkeepsie. Almost every family worked for IBM. My father was friends with this one family. The guy worked for research, and he was clearly off the charts intellectually. He was paid to think outside the box, create cool stuff that's never been conceived of, let alone built, and he had the freedom to innovate. So I was always impressed by that. Me, I always wanted to program in Java, from Visual Basic, the basic one, 4, 5, and 6, and 3. Uh, it wasn't really object oriented, and I wanted to program in Java. And the reason is, I like the fact that the originator worked for Sun Microsystem. The boss came to him and said, "Go create something." So he built Java, which is object oriented language. It protects the kernel. C++, you'd often get into trouble writing to memory, and the whole system would shut down. So my father would teach us, without us knowing it. He'd ask us questions in the car or at the supper table. How many ounces in a quart? Well, after getting it wrong so many times, big gulp, big gulp, big gulp from 7-Eleven has 32 ounces. So whenever I thought of the question, how many ounces in a quart? Big gulp. How many pints in a quart? 2. How many quarts in a gallon? 4. He'd ask us over and over until we burned it into our brains. So he's trying to test us to see how we think. So at the dinner table, he'd say, "Close your eyes. What color is the shirt your brother's wearing? How many cups are on the table?" He's testing your observation skills. I didn't realize it at the time, but it's a powerful concept that not everyone has. He'd say, "How many, if a tree falls in the woods, does it make a sound?" It's such a simple question. Uh, well, let me backtrack. If a tree falls in the woods and nobody's around to hear it, does it make a sound? And obviously, we don't know. You know, it could make a sound, but no one's aware. You could put a tape recorder there and record it, but then someone's there. So what you're doing is you're trying to make an estimate of the unknown, a black box. Over time, I tend to believe that it does make a sound because it makes a ripple in the universe that God's aware of. And therefore, that's my answer. Might be wrong. It's hard to prove. But anyway, another time we're driving somewhere in the car, and he tells me that, like, the fast food restaurants, they originally started out and they only sold empty wrappers and empty cups, and they were having difficulty selling these things. So one day, the head honcho went there and said, "Hey, why don't we put some food in these empty wrappers and empty cups?" And all of a sudden, it took off like hotcakes. Now, you say, what a silly story. How could that's not true, but thinking like that, it makes you flip the problem upside down and forces you to think different. He brought home this puzzle one day where these two cardboard pieces, you place them together like this, you count up the number of things on there. These little people, I forget what you call them, leprechauns or something, and there's 10. So then you pick it up and swap them and count them, there's 11. What the heck just happened? And I swear to God, that problem I would think about all the time as a kid. And then when the internet came out, I researched it, and turns out it's a common, brain teaser, and it does have a solution. And apparently, the one guy, when you switch him, he goes away. So just stuff like that. He'd say, what if people didn't own cars? There were just a bunch of cars on every street with the keys in them, and you just pick one that you wanted and then drove it and then walked to your destination. And then next time you need a car, you just find another one. I wouldn't say it's communism or Socialism is just thinking about problems in a different way. When I played tennis, he says just focus on winning the last point. It's kind of true. So brainstorming, it's good practice to to build up your out of the box thinking. Brainstorming. So one common practice is to write down every idea, no matter how bizarre, and then weed out the bad ideas. Find a new solution from the list, or you can combine multiple ideas into new idea. That's how new stuff is created. Combining multiple things that already exist into a new product. A lot of people wear blinders, they're closed minded, thinking, and perfectionism is the killer of progress. People want to create perfection first time around. That's highly unlikely and it kills innovation. For fun, every weekend as a kid, we drive to the junkyard. So, how many people went to the junkyard as kids for fun? And it was great. The freedom to look around and find all this cool stuff. Every week there'd be different stuff. And I don't mean like crap, like people's junk, like garbage. It was like washers and dryers and bikes and all sorts of metal appliances and this and that. And we go through there and pick off the parts that we needed and take the parts home. And we assembled a bike from there. Actually, that was my bike as a kid. It was produced from the parts of material from the junkyard. And I'll never forget, even back then, I would get bored or something. I'd start moving stuff around and try to organize it. So I'd organize the junkyard. And one time, the leader of the head guy at the junkyard, he came to us and said, "Stop moving this crap around. Don't clean up the junkyard." And I always forget. I never forget that because I'm trying to create order from chaos. And then after we drive, we had a place, it was mountain areas, so there were these there was these large dirt mountains, and we'd set up some cans and we'd shoot our BB guns. So that was kind of non-traditional. I don't think today that would happen very much, but back then it was kind of fun. We'd look for cool old stuff. One time they found a wagon wheel and we brought it home and shellacked it and made it nice. Look for artifacts, from Civil War days or the 1800s, and we'd bring our metal detectors and find coins and rocks. So I guess that's where the archaeology comes from, kind of non-traditional thinking. So as a programmer, I often help coworkers troubleshoot, and they'd tell me the problem and drive, and it would drive me bananas. So I'd say, I have to drive. Let me sit there and think it through. So they would watch over my shoulder and they said, do this, do this, do this. And I said, no, I got to do it this way. And no, but you're going to do it wrong. Well, I'm not trying to reproduce the problem. I'm trying to solve the problem. So I do this, do this, do this. And eventually the solution would just present itself. And they say, how'd you do that? I don't know. It's just out of the box troubleshooting skills. It usually worked. And then I'd go back to my desk and do my own work and stuff. And it was that's how I created like an internal reputation for being able to solve problems early on in the career, when I was doing mostly maintenance coding. So the scientific hypothesis is not new. We observe, we analyze, we conclude, and we repeat. So I do this all the time. I watch for patterns. And, sometimes my wife says, it borders on paranoia. And I say, well, you may be correct, but sometimes they are plotting against you. Like advertisements. Like, who the heck watches these advertisements and says, oh, I'm going to go to the store and buy that because that looks terrific? They show you 1,000 commercials in a 12-minute period. It's disgusting. I don't like it. So, as a non-consumerist, I don't buy things unless I'm forced to. It kind of makes me sick. So, just having that ability to distance yourself from what everyone else agrees and everyone else, and I do this through the scientific process, hypothesis, testing, observing. It's false until proven true. So you could say, well, you must be kind of bored and have a lot of free time. And I say, yeah, that's probably true because I'm not out there shopping, racking up credit card debt so I can work the rest of my life to pay it off. So basically, I say, hey, every time I go in the backyard, it feels like I'm being watched, right? So that's paranoia. But then you look for observations over time, and yeah, it's false. It's false until proven true. Hey, there could be hidden cameras in the house. Well, yeah, that's probably paranoia. But let me go ahead and download this software app, and then test. So you shine the camera, and if it starts beeping red, that's a hidden camera. So yeah, it's false and still proven true. When you find 100 of these uh, blinking red dots, it's possible that you do have hidden cameras in your house. Well, how'd they get there? Who put there? Who's watching? Who knows? It's fun to watch though. It could be considered paranoia, but if you distance yourself and you don't let your life be controlled by it and say, yeah, it's possible that this application is faulty and is picking up, false positives, but we don't know for sure. I could call somebody, an expert, and bring them in and say, hey, is this a hidden camera? And they say, oh, yeah, it is. Well, then my scientific hypothesis of observing, analyzing, concluding is true. So, that's just something to think about. Now, my father worked for IBM for 34 years, started off with programming punch cards in the early days and worked his way up and around and over several different positions, applied for different positions within the organization. At one time, he wrote the document, the course material on project management. So he'd always talk to me about project management and say, hey, if I'm building a swimming pool and it's expected to take 6 months, and then during the second month, there's a delay in the supplies, and I miss a day. How long is the delay of the entire project? And I say, oh, 6 months and a day. And then he'd kind of like say, well, that part was required because it was a dependency. I have to pour the concrete. So if I can't pour the concrete, well, then you can't do the tile. If you can't do the tile, well, then you can't paint it. If you can't paint it, you can't add the, this or that. And he would construct a vision that this project is now 4.5 months late because of one hiccup. And it really makes you think, dependencies and projects, people assume that these little hiccups along the way, they don't delay the project, but in fact, they can cause tremendous delays. So a lot of times, you have these problems that you're trying to solve and they seem insurmountable. And you push it off and you delay it and you procrastinate and you say, it's impossible. I can't do this. Like, let's say I'm going to paint the house. All right, well, I'm not going to paint the house because it's going to take forever. Well, I'm going to sneak up on this problem and not even try. I'm not even going to start the project. I'm not going to start this project to paint the house. I'm just going to go down to the store over here and I'm going to look for colors. And that's it. And then I'll come back and tell the missus and say, hey, why don't we color? So she tells me what color we're going to paint it. And I go down there and say, all right, I'm not going to start this project, but go ahead and give me a couple gallons of this. So I haven't really started the project. And then I come home and let me just open the can for a minute. I'm not going to actually start the project. I'm just going to take my brush here and just see what it looks like. So yeah, I haven't started the project yet, but let me just paint over here now. And then so I got the one wall completed, but I actually haven't started the project yet. And then I do the trim, and then I do this side and this side and this side and this side. And then all of a sudden it's done, but I never started the project because I never acknowledged the fact that the project started. I'm just doing these little tasks over time, but all of a sudden the project's done. And sometimes you really have to sneak up on the project and work on it in silence and then show your results. And by doing so, you can move mountains with, it looks like there's no effort involved, and also you break the problem down into bite-sized manageable chunks. So in our field, or in life, we have to do endless learning. A lot of people try their hardest to avoid any type of learning in the school system, and when they get out of school, they never pick up a book or learn a thing until retirement home, and that's it. It really limits your life experiences because our purpose is to learn and grow. So we were taught to learn from everything and everyone and ask questions, see how they respond. You're talking to somebody and look, if you can find somebody that has a knowledge across a spectrum of information. Some people are experts in a single domain. They're worldly known for this knowledge, but you get them off the topic that they're expert in, and they're not that bright. And sometimes they'll bring the discussion back so that they're talking about their expertise again, because they're familiar with that, they know it inside and out, and they receive accolades and kudos for that. But if you get them off topic, sometimes they don't know. So they've either memorized it or for some reason they just know that one subject. And sometimes you'll find that the loudest person in the room Although they appear confident and smart, sometimes you can see through it and it's very superficial. And, we learned that, sometimes it's okay to appear dumb. Ask questions. Let the let them think they're smart. Let them think you're an idiot. I mean, that's how I got through a good chunk of my life is just to play dumb, because these people won't compete with you, and it's one less enemy created. And by not having to prove yourself or combat people who are jealous or envious or want to do harm, you just go about your life living in freedom. And I find that rewarding much better than trying to have a contest on seeing who's the smartest or the best or what have you. Because there's always somebody new. There's always someone brighter. There's always someone that's can do it faster. Just be happy with what you got and enjoy your freedom. And I remember a story that my father told us. We lived in the Poughkeepsie. We had this nice big garden with all these fruits and vegetables. And he said there was a rabbit that kept getting into the garden and eating some of the tomatoes or the cucumbers or the green peppers. So he would find a hole and patch it. Next day, there's the rabbit again. So he'd patch another hole. Next day, the rabbit. He'd do this over time. He couldn't figure out how the rabbit was getting in. So it turned out that the rabbit never left. He was living inside the garden. So it doesn't matter how many fences, how thick or deep or terrific those fences were, that little guy was living inside the rabbit, living rent free, all the food he could eat. So I always found that a fascinating story, uh, basically thinking inside the fence, outside the fence. So, I've always been in tune with nature, and recently I've found this thing called grounding, where you walk around in the grass with your bare feet. I enjoy going on hikes and travel and experiencing and wandering and just getting lost in your thoughts. So I find that a lot of people go from their air conditioned uh, house to their air conditioned car to their air conditioned office back home in traffic, and they never really get to experience that nature. And I feel like that's something they could change. Also, simplify, less is more, travel light, downsize, focus on quality, not quantity. And if you don't try, you're guaranteed to lose. And if you do try, you open up possibility for success. You never know what could happen. The rabbit and the hare. The rabbit comes out strong, fizzles, and the turtle just outlasts him. Also, be frugal and fix things instead of throw them out. Endless learning. So the hypothesis cycle that we touched on earlier, you have these hypotheses, you test, conclude, and adjust. Sometimes we have these thoughts, and these thoughts make you wonder if something is happening. So you have this hypothesis. It's scientific hypothesis. For example, every time the oven comes on and that burner turns red, I bet you it's real hot. So that's my hypothesis. Is the burner hot when it turns on and turns bright red? So I touch my finger to it and I say, Jesus, I got to go to the emergency room. I tested it and I concluded, you know what? That burner is hot. So I concluded. So I adjust and I say, well, when that burner is on and it's red hot, chances are I'm not going to touch it because I just burned the crap out of my finger. So that's a hypothesis full life cycle. You can apply it to just about anything. It's fun to do, and you just keep tracking. And some of these stuff I tracked for years. I noticed that it would rain on a holiday. I say, oh, okay, 4th of July just got rained out. Next holiday, it rained. Next holiday, it rained. I tracked this for 10 years. And I'd say, hey, look, honey, it's going to rain tomorrow. Why is that? Because it's a holiday. And sure enough, it would rain. Then I would pull a data set from the weather, and sure enough, there was no indication of rain. I'm like, wait a minute. I know for a fact that it rained because I've been tracking it for 10 years, and all the data that points to the exact opposite. So that hypothesis is kind of like, well, now it stopped raining on every holiday because I blogged about it a while back. I'm not saying that there's this great thing going on that everyone's unaware of, but man, I tested it and it was true for a solid 10 years. I blogged about it and the pattern stopped. So, yeah, is this guy a whack job? I don't know. I'm just telling you, this is the hypothesis. I'm smart enough to know that, you know, strange things could happen, but chances are not. And it's not like it's going to rule my life or nothing, but I enjoy these hypothesis games because, you know, you know, watching commercials for 7 straight hours in between bits of reruns, it doesn't intellectually stimulate. So I have to look for things that are challenging, and this hypothesis cycle uh, seems to keep me busy. So anyway, that's a bit of a bizarre topic today. It gets on the fringe, but it also has some solid bits of information that you could take away with as valuable. So with that said, I want to thank you for your time and appreciate it, and have a great day. Talk to you soon. Thanks.